Welcome to the Port Huron Statement. I have been thinking about, creating this episode now for... I had material planned and an outline planned, and then this Renee Good shooting, and it's jarring because the complete orchestration of events surrounding that shooting in particular are incredibly revealing of the entirety. It's like saying the quiet part out loud type of thing. So first off, when you compare the multiple different available views, you realize that the officer that ends up shooting Good is walking towards the car and then directly in front of the car as the other officers are approaching the car, creating the, creating a sort of crisis response. I mean, the way that they approach the vehicle and grab at the door and then reach into the vehicle is going to create high anxiety in the driver of the vehicle. Now, when we take into totality that timing with the other officer's movement in front of the vehicle, right? So it's timed such that the likelihood of the driver just hitting the gas and causing inconsequential contact, providing necessary just cause to execute. I mean, so to make the case that this was a defensive discharge of the weapon is baseless because of the posturing. The officer doesn't seek to dodge the vehicle. He leans in. Also, as the vehicle is exiting, he's clear of the vehicle. He takes, a shot as the vehicle is clear of him and leaving. And it is a deliberate, aimed and postured shot. And further, again, he's not in the path of the vehicle at all until right as they are approaching the vehicle, using an affect that will elicit an anxiety response, especially, given the combination of factors there and the fact that ICE had apparently been keeping tabs on her for some time, and there really is no justification for ICE surveilling her as they have stated they were doing. They've Noem, or whatever, has justified this shooting because Good was sighted in other locations observing ICE officers. And so then we go deeper into this and we realize that Good is in a same-sex relationship, but also is engaged in these missionary projects. Also, further, is more or less taking on an activist role locally. So, this confluence of character features, coupled with the volume of vehicle-related ICE shootings, of U.S. citizens, the immediacy of the claim of terrorism and the commitment to it. So, I guess I'm assuming we all know what I'm talking about here. I'm not saying anything new. I guess I'm sort of rehashing it because from my perspective, it's been really I have gotten an enormous amount of enormous, I mean, in this context is even a couple contexts, but more than a couple, from the intelligence community, individuals. So, if you are deploying something like LLM intercept and utilizing man-in-the-middle to inject into my JavaScript, and when I track that JavaScript, it comes back to Ashburn, Virginia data centers directly associated with NSA and CIA. I tend to believe you when you tell me you're NSA and CIA, So, I don't even know what to say, because there is information that I have access to, and that information establishes clearly a murder under color of law pattern of assassination. It's an explicitly utilized means of eliminating essentially political targets extrajudiciously, extra legally, and usually bypassing normal chain of command. This is kind of what I've been on about a lot. William King Harvey rifle. These are programs designed to enable murders that are plausibly deniable. And I guess the reason that I am having a difficult time in sort of delivering this is because there's a growing there is no direct smoking gun suggesting what the conclusion is that is hard not to be made given the volume of information I'm referencing. But I can't say with any certainty. Gosh, how do you? Well, we can go back to George Floyd. George Floyd represents an example of what is likely a murder under color of law. And the intentional execution, assassination of these individuals that you may not think would be the targets for high-value executions are, through coincidental awareness of highly sensitive information. They often aren't aware of the sort of nuanced piece of information that some paranoid member of the intelligence community or law enforcement or political or could be a corporate individual. I mean, there are so many gears running in this machine, and because of the effects of compartmentalization, and when you're talking about this type of execution, oh my gosh, it takes so much backstory that's it's hard to explain, and I'm trying to figure out how much how do you? So, I guess you need to look into the history of assassination programs run by the intelligence community in the United States, the motivations of them, and how they've been executed. I guess I'm gonna try and do a real quick one on here. So a good example is just the attempts that were made on the life of Fidel Castro. I'm trying to think though, like there's so many different ways that people have been executed that follow this pattern. This isn't the only one, obviously, but when you have a rash of these vehicle shootings and they follow the same pattern, like a person that is not trying to shoot to kill, like that's not a defensive posturing. You don't, in the attempt of dodging the vehicle, you don't end up leaning into the window. Further, shooting someone that's driving a vehicle, especially making that multiple point turn to try and avoid the officer. Shooting her when she was clearly making an attempt to avoid collision creates a far more dangerous situation, because now you have that Ford-run vehicle that you're talking about being so dangerous, rather than being controlled by someone that clearly is trying to avoid collision, is now controlled by no one. So any argument that's being made that justifies shooting her in that situation is made in bad faith. Further, if we compare the logic of these talking heads, we will understand that their take on everything is exclusively predicated on their best interests and the hierarchy's dictation. It's entirely red team, blue team. There's no real there's no good faith in what Noem is saying. And it's easy to really prove that. Because my hair is so freaking dry for me. Because she's, she's a sociopath, but what's the, oh yeah. Because if you look at her appraisal of the July 6th situation, and then you compare it with this situation, you're talking about such a massive gulf in the logic, such wild cognitive dissonance in what justifies lethal force, that there is literally no possible justification for that duality of interpretation other than bad faith. There is literally no other possible justification. And this goes down the board. So when you compare the July 6 patriots to Good as a terrorist, and you examine the justifications given as at face value, then the only thing that you can conclude is that these people are lying for their own best interest. Now, if you don't take them at face value, then you have to assume that these people are lying to the majority of the population for their own best interest, while dog whistling a small portion of the population for their mutual best interest. So essentially, what they're saying is a lie to the majority of the population, while a signaled truth to this, elite faction. And I guess they all think that they're that faction, but it's like, oh my gosh, MAGA is splintering. It is, because It's predicated on cognitive dissonance, information control. It is a psychological operation by definition. And what's interesting is that Trump is exposing other psychological operations and other, well, just like he can't help but scapegoat. And so I think that we've transitioned into this new realm where he's been advised to fuck up on that shit and go bomb shit, take shit over. It's a wag the dog play, because there's just no way for him to touch any of these domestic issues without blowing up in his face because of the established record of his insanely stupid policies. And so there's no real way to say, like, this was wrong, because a lot of it's his own policies, I guess, or all of it. This is right. And then why didn't you implement it in your previous presidency? And this is true of the American health care stuff, where they're saying they have better alternatives, but they don't actually offer alternatives. And this is happening over and over and over again. They want to collapse the existing infrastructure before they create another alternative infrastructure, while saying that the alternative infrastructure is going to be great. And then they lie about what that alternative infrastructure is going to be. We're just going to give you tens of thousands of dollars to pay for your medical. It's not anything like that at all. And it's the healthcare savings accounts is a elitist nightmare. You don't want that, trust me. It's not health insurance. It's just you're going to prepay for services with a subsidized allotment. It's not going to be as high as you would think, because you're going to be expected to save it over time and use it for one big illness, and everything else is going to be out of pocket, more or less. Otherwise, you're going to have to contribute to it. I guess it would cover like basics. I mean, it's just because of the way that healthcare costs are being inflated through the existence of this insurance-like regime. If you did remove the insurance regime, you really could reduce the cost of healthcare dramatically. That's the ideal thing, is just removing this bizarre and insane private insurance regime that dominates all of the costs and occupies the space of the customer for the entirety of the system. And this creates enormous opportunities for grift. And I mean, it happens all the time. The number of insurance fraud schemes that utilize patients, it's enormous. It's so bad that I know of, it's crazy, dozens of people that are being given malpractice, chronic management malpractice, where rather than actually curing the problem, which is highly curable, they're managing the pain forever with cortisone, and then there's a bunch of other examples like this. And another one too is just pushing people into these psychiatric medications when their real problems are economic and social and legal, and this society is betraying them, and then you're pretending like they're mentally fucked up because they're fucked. It's not that they're fucked up, it's that they're fucked over. And then there is a very real incentive to be sociopathic, to advance wealthy individuals' machinations and desire to contain their social, political, and legal liabilities. And this goes all the way to the top, all the way to the top, where you have, as it goes higher and gets in the military and gets in the intelligence community, they leverage the intelligence community and the military to contain their liabilities. In the case of Donald Trump, these include compromat liabilities related directly with Epstein. There's I'm going to pivot here. So this all too is directly germane to Port Huron, because all of these networks are highly active here. Like, in the sense that, believe it or not, there is a wildly active psychological operative apparatus in Port Huron. And it operates in this strange space between assorted businesses, captured institutions, captured and infiltrated religions, and captured and infiltrated pretty much everything. I mean, there's reasons for this, and they have to do with what you call psychotronic weapons, devices that utilize electromagnetic and radio frequencies that will have a neurological effects. So they found that you can impose essentially moods if you can entrain these frequencies. There's a lot of different elements to this too, and this also includes blood-brain barrier compromisation technologies, so directed energy weapons of all kinds. And these are and have been tested locally for a long time. And then it's just a general behavior modification zoo. And why that is, it has to do with really the Port Huron Statement itself. Was a lot of the motivation of it. That and the fact that Henry Ford was right here, and he's a major financier of this messed up hierarchical occult Nazi shit that's dominating the politics of the area. So it's a society built on compromise, on that's what it's built on. Whether you are in the honeymoon phase or not, or whatever phase you're in, it's a compromise scam. Every favor that you do is actually another chain that's wrapped around you. So don't gain any, illusions here. Think about Maduro. Maduro has been involved in a sanctions, routing scam with Maduro for years. And what did Maduro get? He got arrested. That's what you get. You're not going to get protected for playing his game and enriching him. And that's not just him, that's an entire social and control system. There is no way to protect yourself from it other than dismantling it. So that's what it comes down to. Unless you want to be shot unless you want the women in your life, or you personally, if you're to be shot for, what you could say is maybe she was guilty of a fucking, ticket. Should you be shot for impeding traffic? Because that's what it's really coming down to. Should you be shot for impeding traffic? Should you be shot because the administration feels as though you are inconvenient to their political advancement and survival? Should you be shot for trying to document the actions of federal employees? I mean, because these are people that are acting with the resources that have been pooled from us collectively. So their actions really should always come with direct citizen oversight. And the fact that there is an expectation that they have the right to shoot people because they're putting on this badge, regardless of why or what the badge represents, is a circular logic of absolute insanity. So you're saying that you have authority. So the problem is that it's a circular logic, because they are able to have license to kill, to arrest Maduro, to shoot this woman, but at the same time, and also organize and murder Charlie Kirk. Let's not forget that Charlie Kirk was murdered because they wanted to inflame and motivate the conservative base. That was why Charlie Kirk was killed. It was a coordinated assassination, and that I have on pretty good sources inside the IC. And that's not just me saying this out my ass. That was never my goal to find that out. That was something that just came out in the wash, and I think that that's something that a lot of people know now. It's not like a major secret. But think about that. Think about that. the fact that they blew away one of their most, like, important shining stars. They turned him into a martyr so that they could float their boat a little longer, continue the grift, and start this engage the United States in World War III so that we all have to come together regardless of how fucked over by our president and by this fucking shadow government we've been. They're going to essentially try to commit us into wars that we cannot fucking back out of as a means to prevent us from litigating their fucking crimes. That's the play now. Think about that. And also, the important thing is this is testing the water as to whether they can just indiscriminately, with tacit excuse, and if there was no video, she would have just been a domestic terrorist, period. But whether they can just shoot American citizens because they're inconvenient, whether our population is going to accept just culling people for being politically inconvenient. I mean, it's pretty transparent. I mean, I guess in that, no, that is it. Even if they didn't, even if this wasn't what you call a baited altercation, and murder under color of law, where the legal action is theater designed to create a justification for using lethal force or for an accidental, coincidental, or otherwise whatever death, what happened. But, yeah, so even if we assume that this wasn't that, which it's difficult to come to any other conclusion, then we still have to contend with what the fuck, how else do they create this immediate response immediately if that's not what happened? I guess, because why is it immediately a domestic terrorist? I mean, either she's watching with such incredible bias against the general public and against assumed leftists that her definition of murder changes so crazy wildly that, like, she can't be a law enforcement for something. Like, if you are unable to be objective to that degree, then you can't be in law enforcement. And then this is another problem, is that people are being selected for law enforcement specifically because they have this remarkable bias and the ability to commit to that bias forever. Like, regardless of the cognitive dissonance, regardless of the fact that everyone knows that they're lying or they're literally insane, they'll keep committing to it without consequence. So another problem here is that we are not issuing the necessary consequence to people that are sociopathically and obviously lying. And which, I guess the totality of this situation is really, really damning. There is no way to come to the conclusions that they're trying to project unless you are completely unobjective. And then that just means that you're a victim of deep behavior modification, and really you are the audience, because you have to feel the sand sinking, right? I mean, this wasn't meant to be a trap, but you're making it one. The best play is to stop being destructive and ignorant. I mean, for example, Donald Trump's big oil play, which was really about saving his ass because the U.S. silver markets were cornered because Maduro was not going to sell us raw or whatever unrefined silver, and China and Switzerland and all this stuff because of his craziness. So he had to impose that regime change in order to compel the silver tap to come back on. So that's what that really was about. But he was selling it. It was a problem. He had to solve a problem he made. But the idea that we were going to process all of this crude, which it's interesting because I'm kind of like they're producing the heavy sour crude, and there is a decent amount of heavy sour crude refineries in the United States, in Texas, yeah. So, but no one wants to invest in Venezuela. They're saying, well, in the Venezuelan infrastructure, I'm sure that they'll invest in refining the crude. But, so I guess the point is like this whole charade of the past couple weeks, which is all really predicated on trying to cover up for things that this regime and Donald Trump personally have done in their past, or the recent, like more or less present, to fuck over themselves and or the country, mostly both. It's just making more problems to try and distract from the problems they made, because they can't solve problems. They don't know how to solve problems. They only know how to distract from them. And so the question really is do you want a government that can only distract from problems and lie to you, or are we going to start transitioning into actually coming up with solutions? Because we don't have much more of a fucking period of time before this bullshit is going to result in a real collapse of civilization here. Because this is the most detrimental and destructive fucking sequence of events one could possibly imagine. And I just don't get how you could be a logical and rational person and continue to condone what is going on inside of the head of the President of the United States and inside of the United States at large. Because it's just self-destructive. It's so self-destructive, and if you can't see it, I guess, that's part of the consequence of a lot of these technologies that are designed to prevent you from having the capacity to see it. I mean, the insular cortex suppression is a large portion that's, integrating information from multiple different sources within your own brain and exterior, So a lot of these people, they don't understand themselves, like quite literally. It's part of the whole thing, to prevent someone from developing identity. It makes them a lot easier to lie to, a lot easier to manipulate. The goal is to turn them into just someone that just primitively chases rewards, right? A carrot and stick all the time. Just means that your quality of life is always going to go down. Because it takes a matter of awareness. Otherwise, if you're predictable and you're in this environment, they're going to train you to be a sociopath, and they're just going to keep exploiting it. That's why you see there's a lot of white trash assets. They're not in the CIA. There are some white trash in the CIA, but there are a lot of assets. And, what you call IC parallel. People that are essentially doing the dirty work for this fucked up criminal enterprise that uses the fucking excuse of national security or law enforcement. But it's really just a bunch of, corrupt politicians, bureaucrats, and businessmen, organized crime, freaking all this crazy, stupid nonsense of people coming up with some crazy reason why they're better than others, or they have to do it, or human nature, or whatever nonsense that they use to excuse fucking other people over. But that's what it really is too. It's about manufacturing. Justifications to exploit. I mean, this is not an economy that it will be successful. It can't be successful. We have an exploitation economy that's been engineered over time to bolster an illegitimate control infrastructure. And as the intelligence community becomes more and more cognizant of the illegitimacy of this government, when you look at the totality of the deployment of the psychotronics, which look up the Fry effect. These are devices that will create a voice inside your head. It's not mystical. It is just science. There are resonations that occur in your cochlea and under the influence of microwave. So that'll create a sound, no matter what. Then if you modulate that sound, just like a speaker, it'll create whatever sound you run through it. And so it's literally using the bone of your ear like a speaker. And so they've told people this is the voice of God. And these are government fucking programs. There's a paper trail. Yep, there is. Anyway, But so, and even telling them, to listen to God, He's going to tell you to vote for. Do not research this election or any of the candidates. God doesn't want that. He wants you to go to the polls, and He wants you to vote for exactly who He tells you. Just listen to the voice of God. You can trust that. And then you have the movement of hundreds of financially incorporated and associated churches to becoming the polling site of these areas. So that's, I mean, why we have a separate church and state? Why are so many churches, especially in these swing states, why are they, and in states with active psychological operations, large active psychological operations, but why are so many of these churches becoming polling sites? And the answer is really disturbing. Most of them are financially associated with these projects. So the CIA, which we know has been moving drugs for a long time, so it turns out a bunch of black ops have been financed through moving drugs for decades, but they launder the money through churches. Like that, all that money was in Joel Osteen's frickin' walls. That's money being laundered from drug proceeds. It's part of the CIA fucking black ops funding shit. So they use religion as a means to control. And that's what an asset is. I mean, Joel Osteen is an asset. He's an asset that is deeply, deeply invested in a specific brand of Christian sort of psychological operations, which I would argue are actually less evil than the demon warfare stuff, which specifically leans in to the technology. It's designed to make use of psychotronic technology as best as possible, voice of God specifically, because if, the world is this demon war, then they can make these voices manifest in your head reliably. It's perfect synergy between what, psychosocial priming, religious priming, and the technology. I mean, I'm trying to think of what, there's so much data on this. I mean, it's really remarkable, frankly. And outside, I mean, even non, or even public, there's a ton of public data on this. So, there was even a faux pas in the U.S. Army where they had up for a couple months a lot of their material on their psychotronic arsenal, and so I have a lot on it. It's weird because my sourcing is directly the U.S. military and intelligence community and DARPA, and nothing that I've shared has been. It's all been public. I'm trying to think. Yeah, no, I guess. I haven't shared any non-public documents at all, really. Yeah. I guess I've mentioned some things that are conclusions of mine that maybe have been gleaned from some information that's non-public, but all this stuff that I'm talking about right now is verifiable using public data. There is a huge arsenal of psychotronic technologies, and the primary source is just used the patent registry, scholarly articles, I guess, and the problem too is that there's a bunch of landmines in sort of discovering this information, because there is a vested interest in misinforming you, so they want to push you into the demon shit or mystical occult shit. They want to create an illogical and inaccessible sort of causality so that you can't know what's going on. Engineered reality. These are technologies that utilize waveforms. And that's what, they'll convince people that they're doing magic through all types of stuff. I mean, fishing line, the psychotronics, just to get them to do crazy shit. Because, they believe in this God then. And then they'll give them the Abraham test. So they'll make them prove to God, the God that they're hearing in their head, their faith. And then you just have to document the crazy shit that God just told them to do. And once they realize it's a bunch of bullshit, it doesn't matter. You got them documented doing some fucking crazy shit. And so my feeling is that some element of this Good had probably stumbled on in her life or rubbed shoulders with. And that coupled with her sort of activism created a panic moment. Because the missionary work in Northern Ireland, to know about the variety of deeply disturbing, sexually exploitive psychological operations and compromat farms and sort of, indoctrinate, like, these sort of religious movements that are psychological operations, the 2x2s or whatever, the way. There's a bunch from King Cora and Colin Wallace. There's a bunch of them. In fact, there's a lot of individuals locally that are germane to that region. The lower, sort of like Derry and like north and like south, right around that border and all of Northern Ireland. There's a lot of places though. The other thing too is they use the missions as a laundering vehicle a lot of the times. They also will use that as a human trafficking vehicle a lot of the time. It's really dark. It is really, really dark. But it doesn't have to keep being this way. Like, the only way it keeps being this dark and fucked up and destructive and keeps returning humanity to these busts and these depressions and recessions and destitution and collapsing dignity, if we actually just address these issues with solutions rather than concealment, we will find solutions because they exist. So if the people that are in power now refuse to give permission to fix the problems, then we need to dedicate ourselves to removing those people from power immediately, and also beyond that, recognizing that their authority is only given as a result of our collective will. So if we refuse to grant them the authority, then they do not have it. And I understand that that is an esoteric idea when you only contribute a small portion of the total, authority that someone is using and weaponizing against you. But if we can start to make people realize, because it's weaponized against everyone, the most loyal people are sacrificed by this system. Epstein himself served this system so absolutely that he thought there was no way he was absolutely untouchable. And he was. They couldn't have prosecuted him. They had to kill him. And they had to kill him. And they did. So think about that. I mean, this is someone that had all the leverage in the world. And everyone owed him favors, made people rich. And, I mean, I think he's a disgusting person, but I just am trying to illustrate that, regardless of your loyalty, you are going to be purged, culled, betrayed as soon as it's convenient. Period. If you're contributing to the system that I'm talking about, the leaders. So, if you want to be in a system that isn't barbaric, then you're going to have to cease to grant barbaric individuals the authority they currently wield.